Someone asked you at a dinner party last week, leaning in, voice dropping slightly like they were sharing something clever. So, are you analyzing me right now? And you smiled. You gave the answer you always give. The one that's technically true and completely exhausts you to repeat. And somewhere underneath the smile was a very specific kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with the hour. This is what people don't tell you about studying the human mind for a living. It's not the long hours, it's not the emotional weight of the room, though that's real. It's the relentless, cheerful assumption that your entire existence is a diagnostic exercise, that you are at all times running a quiet background process on everyone in the vicinity, filing observations, building profiles, taking notes in your head that you'll later reference in some professional context nobody can quite picture. You're not, or at least not in the way they mean. But try explaining that at a dinner party. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes with knowing too much about why people do things. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in gradually the way cold does in an old house. Not a dramatic drop, just a slow, creeping understanding that the rooms are harder to keep warm than they used to be. You sit with people in their hardest moments. You understand the architecture of their pain in ways that take most people years to even name. And then you go home. And you make dinner. And nobody asks. That's not a complaint. It's just the actual shape of the thing. Most people carry a version of what they do into who they are. The accountant who can't stop noticing numbers on signs. The chef who eats at a restaurant and mentally reconstructs the dish before the plate hits the table. There's always some bleed. But the particular bleed of psychology is stranger, because what you've studied isn't systems or flavors. It's the interior life of human beings, and you are a human being, which means the knowledge folds back on itself in ways that are sometimes clarifying and sometimes, honestly, not. Here's what that actually looks like. With reasonable certainty, what's happening when you're anxious. You can name it, trace it, locate it in a framework, identify the cognitive distortion underneath it, if there is one. And none of that makes the anxiety leave any faster. Knowing the name of a wave doesn't keep it from knocking you over. But there's a specific layer of absurdity in being knocked over when you can see the wave clearly and label it accurately and explain to someone else exactly why it's happening, and still be standing in the water getting wet. That's not a failure of the profession. It's just what it is to be inside a discipline that doesn't grant its practitioners immunity. A study by Mahoney in 1997 looked at the personal and professional well-being of therapists across a range of experience levels. What it found wasn't what most people might assume. Therapists weren't more emotionally regulated than the general population in their private lives. They experienced doubt, relational difficulty, depression, grief, at rates that mirrored rather than beat the broader sample. The knowledge didn't protect them. What it sometimes did was make them better at noticing the gap between where they were and where they thought they should be, which is its own specific kind of difficulty. People hear this and assume it means the profession is broken or that the people in it are frauds. That's the version they want, because it's simple. The more accurate version is less satisfying, that being human is not a condition that expertise resolves, and psychologists, clinical, counseling, research, school-based, occupational, all of them are practicing their discipline from inside the same condition as everyone else, just with more vocabulary for it. The vocabulary, actually, is its own complicated gift. There is something genuinely useful about having language for your internal experience, to be able to recognize avoidance behavior when it's happening, or to clock that what feels like anger is sitting on top of something that arrived first. That's not nothing, but language can also become a kind of buffer, a way of staying at a scholarly distance from something that actually needs to be felt rather than filed. Some of the most intellectually fluent people in mental health are also the ones who are best at narrating their experience in ways that feel like engagement, but are actually a very elegant form of keeping their distance. If you've done this, you know exactly what it feels like. The slight smoothness of it, the way it sounds like openness while functioning like a wall. And then there's the thing nobody says out loud in most professional circles. The work gets into you. Not always in the dramatic ways people imagine, not usually as secondary trauma, though that's real and documented and worth taking seriously. More often, it's quieter. It's the accumulation of sitting in rooms with human suffering, week after week, and carrying the weight of someone else's most difficult internal territory without anyone particularly noticing that you're carrying it. Because you're the one who's supposed to know how. Colleagues ask how your caseload is, supervisors check in about clinical process, but the actual interior experience of absorbing, holding, and attempting to metabolize what passes through a consulting room over the span of a career, that tends to get processed alone, or not processed at all until it finds another way out. Here's what the dinner party question is actually pointing at, without meaning to. People sense something, not analysis, not judgment. Something more like presence, the quality of attention that builds in someone who has spent years genuinely learning to listen, who has trained themselves out of preparing their response while someone is still talking, who actually sits with uncertainty rather than rushing toward resolution. That's the thing people feel. And they don't quite have a name for it, so they reach for the nearest approximation. You're analyzing me? They're not wrong that something is happening. They're just wrong about what it is. The real life of a psychologist is mostly ordinary in the ways that matter. The laundry piles up. The difficult conversations with their own people don't go better just because they know the theory. They still read the room wrong sometimes, still say the thing that lands sideways, still wake at 3 a.m. about something they said 6 years ago, or didn't say, or should have found a better way to say. The difference isn't immunity, it's maybe a slightly longer leash on self-compassion. A bit more tolerance for the fact that knowing something and doing something with that knowledge are very different kinds of tasks, and the gap between them is where most actual human life takes place. If you are a psychologist, or a therapist, or a counselor, or a student somewhere in that direction, and something in the last few minutes has felt more true than comfortable, you already know which part of this landed. You don't need me to circle it. And if you're someone who's asked that question at a party, who's looked at someone with a psychology background and felt something uncertain about being in the room with them, what you were actually feeling was probably just the unfamiliar sensation of being genuinely listened to, which is, it turns out, a stranger experience in daily life than it should be. There's something in the pinned comment I'd point you toward, a set of 7-day guides and planners built around the things that tend to build up quietly. Mental overload, the inability to actually switch off, sleep that doesn't reset you the way it should. Each one is structured around specific daily actions, not more theory to file away. Because the information was never really the missing piece. It's in the pinned comment if you want to take a look. And if this one resonated, subscribe and hit the bell. The next one drops soon.